So hi, I will be discussing how globalized economy works today in terms of international trade and international development. First, what is international trade? International trade is simply the exchange of goods and services between countries. It includes the import and export of products such as raw materials, clothing, technologies, and many more that can be used in trading between states or countries. And international trading is said to be the lifeblood of global economy. First, because of international trade, there is globalization or there is modernization. And it also helps to improve the economy of a country, and it helps to increase the standard living of the people, and it helps to the foreign exchange earnings of a country. The GATT, or the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trades, wanted to promote international trade in term by lowering the trade barriers. This happened in post-World War II. GATT was signed by 23 countries. And for JT to accomplish this, they made a series of rounds, in total of 9 rounds, with different states dealing with issues such as tariff cuts and favorable treatment with developing countries. And in 1995, GATT renamed itself as the WTO, or the World Trade Organization. So there are two important procedures initiated in WTO. First is the TPRM, or the Trade Policy Review Mechanism, in which it conducts a periodic surveillance in the members' trade practices. Basically, it is an analysis to a WTO members' trade practices. It is a peer-to-peer transparency exercise based on two reports, the government reports and the WTO member report. The second one is the dispute settlement body. It is an authoritative panel. This is where they hear and settle the trade disputes of a country. If it is said, if the members of this were to violate a rule, the WTO would impose a punishment or a penalty for them. So we will be talking about the Doha Round in 2001. Doha Round was a development round which designed to help improve, or to help developing countries correct the inequities of the previous trade agreement. It is designed to correct injustices in the current agreements on global trades and agriculture, but it is said that the round failed in 2006. It is because there are more developing countries getting involved in this round, and because of that, negotiations were complicated, because we all know if there are more countries gets involved, and especially developing countries, there will be lots of opinions, and negotiations happens. That is why Doha round is said to be failed. So international development goal is to have a better world for everyone without discrimination, poverty, injustices, lack of food, which is also includes in poverty, because the the poverty in our world is very visible. Example, there are states or countries that is wealthy, and there are countries that is overly poor and still striving. So international development is a broad concept that indicates the idea of a country or society having a different level of development. World Bank has changed its orientation over time without undermining its commitment towards liberal economics. And in 1990, sustainable development became part of the bank. Sustainable development is an approach towards the economic development that integrates concern for renewable resources and environment. So, Washington Consensus. Washington Consensus term was coined by John Williamson, and it is a bank support of private sector participation. It is a set of free market economic policies which is supported by IMF, World Bank, and the US Treasury. Its followers believe that with privatization and liberalization of trades, only development will occur. Privatization is the transfer of a public business into private. So the IMF realized that many countries seemingly temporary balance of payments problems were actually a long-term problem were actually a long-term structural problems, and during the 1980s IMF decided to provide longer term loans for the countries that is still in debts. So they will give this if the states adopted structural adjustment program consistent with the Washington Consensus. Structural adjustment program was a loan provided by the IMF to countries that is experiencing economic crisis. So in 1990s, it is still visible that the countries are still in debt even with the help of the IMF. So the Heavily Indebted Poor Countries, or HIPC, initiative began an effort to reduce or eliminate the debt of the poorest states. So by the 2008, 14 states were already paid or canceled all of their debts. And by this economic globalization, there's still this question if the benefits are distributed fairly. So the UN has undertaken the task of setting 8 Millennium Development Goals, which is presented in the screen now. This commit the world leader to combat poverty, hunger, disease, literacy, environmental degradation, and discrimination against women.
Good morning, everyone. I am Sophia Erin Armastar, and I am responsible for discussing the topic about the survey of the most influential national political economy systems in the world. In here, we will discuss about the various political economy approaches of the particular states that we will mention later on as this report progresses. And also, we will discuss the significance of these systems in the world. So the first one will be about the American system of market-oriented capitalism. So the American system of political economy is founded on the premise that economic activity is to benefit consumers while maximizing wealth creation. Thus, this shows that the distribution of wealth is of secondary importance. Despite the numerous exceptions, the American economy does approach the neoclassical model of a competitive market economy. What is the neoclassical model of a competitive market economy? Neoclassical model of competitive market economy shows that individuals are assumed to maximize their own private interests or utility, and business corporations are expected to maximize profits. So let's now move on to the American model. The American model, like the neoclassical model, rests on the assumption that markets are competitive, and if they are not competitive, competitions are promoted through antitrust and other policies. Now, what is antitrust? Antitrust is a broad group of state and federal laws that are designed to make sure that the businesses are competing fairly. Antitrust exists to promote competition among sellers, limit monopolies, and give consumers more options. So that is what antitrust is all about. Now, in the American model, almost any economic activity is permitted unless explicitly forbidden, and the economy is assumed to be open to the outside world unless specifically closed. Um, this American model also emphasizes on consumerism and wealth creation that results in powerful pro-consumption bias and insensitivity, at least when compared to the Japanese and German models to the social welfare impact of economic activities. So that's what the American model is all about. Emphasis on consumerism and wealth creation and the competitive market. So now let's move on to the American economy. American economy is based upon the abstract theory of economic science to a greater degree than in any other economy. At the same time, however, the American economy is appropriately characterized as a system of managerial capitalism. To put things differently, the economy was profoundly transformed by the late 19th century emergence of huge corporations and the accompanying shift from proprietary capitalism to one dominated by a large oligopolistic corporations. Thus, to shorten things, management was separated from ownership and the corporate elite virtually became a law unto itself. Subsequently, with the New Deal of the 1930s, the power balance shifted noticeably away from big business when a strong regulatory bureaucracy was established and organized labor was empowered. So, in effect, the neoclassical laissez-faire ideal was diluted by the notion that the federal government had the responsibility to promote economic equity and social welfare. The economic ideal of a self-regulating economy was further undermined by the passage of the Full Employment Act and the acceptance of the Keynesian idea. What does this mean? That the federal government has a responsibility to maintain full employment through the use of macroeconomic policies. So what is macroeconomic policies? Macroeconomic talks about the fiscal and monetary policies. So that's what it is. And although at the opening of the 21st century, the federal government retains full responsibility for full employment and social welfare. But then, a significant retreat from this commitment began with the 1980 election of Ronald Reagan as a president of the United States and the triumph of a more conservative economic ideology emphasizing free and unregulated markets. So let's move on to the next topic. The next topic is all about the role of the American government in the economy. The role of the American government in the economy is determined not only by the influence of the neoclassical model on American economic thinking, but also by fundamental features of the American political system. Authority over the economy is divided among the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the federal government and between the federal government and the 50 states. Whereas the Japanese Ministry of Finance has virtual monopoly power over the Japanese financial system, in the United States, this responsibility is shared by the Treasury, the Federal Reserve, and several other powerful and independent federal agencies. Furthermore, all of those agencies are strongly affected by actions of the legislative and judicial branches of government. In addition, the 50 states frequently contest the authority of the federal government over economic policy and implement important policies of their own. Industrial policy represents another great difference between the United States and other economies. So what is industrial policy? Industrial policy refers to deliberate efforts by a government to determine the structure of the economy through such devices as financial subsidies, trade protection, or government procurement. So, industrial policy may take form either of sectoral policies of benefit to particular industrial or economic sectors or policies that benefit particular firms. In this way, such policies differ from macroeconomic and general policies designed to improve the overall performance of the economy. Policies such as federal support for education and research and development. So, although Japan has actively promoted sector-specific policies throughout the economy, the United States has employed these policies in just a few areas, notably in agriculture and national defense. However, the United States took a major step toward establishing a national industrial policy in the 1980s. So, we will tackle the justification for industrial policy. The rationale or justification of industrial policy and associated interventionist activities is that some industrial sectors are more important than others for the overall economy. The industries selected are believed to create jobs of higher quality, like those in manufacturing, to produce technological or other spillovers for the overall economy, and to have a high value added. These industries are frequently associated with national defense or are believed to produce a highly beneficial effect on the rest of the economy. The computer industry and other high-tech sectors provide examples of such industries. In general, however, the only justification for an industrial policy considered legitimate in the United States is to overcome market failure. In practice, most American economists, public officials, and business leaders strongly opposed to industrial policy. Why? Why are they opposing the concept of industrial policy? Their principal objection is that governments are incapable of picking winners. Many argue that politicians will support particular industries for political reasons rather than for sound economic reason. American economists argue that the structure and distribution of industries in the United States should be left entirely to the market. This belief is supported by the assumption that all industries are created equal and that there are no strategic sectors. So, nevertheless, despite the arguments against having an industrial policy in America, such policies have developed in the areas of agriculture, national security, and research and development. So, that's what the American system of market-oriented capitalism is all about. So, see you at the next state. So now let's move on to the next topic, and or rather than the next state that I will be discussing is about the Japanese system of developmental capitalism. So at the end of the World War II, where the world experienced the Great Depression, American occupation officials advised that the Japanese should follow the theory of comparative advantage and hence concentrate on labor-intensive products in rebuilding their economy. Japanese economic and political elite, however, had quite different ideas and would have nothing to do with what they considered an American effort to relegate Japan to the low end of the economic and technological spectrum. Instead, the Japanese Ministry of International Trade and Industry, or the MITI, and other agencies of the Japanese Economic High Command set their sights on making vanquished Japan into the economic and technological equal, and perhaps even the superior of the West, which is notable in our current times today. At the opening of the 21st century, this objective has remained the driving force of Japanese society. Furthermore, to continue, in the Japanese scheme of things, the economy is subordinate to the social and political objectives of the society. Ever since the Meiji Restoration in 1868, Japan's overriding goals have been making the economy self-sufficient and catching up with the West. In the pre-World War II years, this ambition meant building a strong army and becoming an industrial power. Since its disastrous defeat in World War II, Japan abandoned militarism and has focused on becoming a powerful industrial and technological nation, while also promoting internal social harmony among the Japanese people that we see today. There has been a concerted effort by the Japanese state to guide the evolution and functioning of their economy in order to pursue these socio-political objectives. So, let's move on to the developmental state capitalism of Japan. The term developmental state capitalism best captures the essence of the system because this characterization conveys the idea that the state must play a central role in national economic development and in the competition with the West. Despite the imperative of competition, the Japanese frequently subordinate pursuit of economic efficiency to social equity and domestic harmony. Many aspects of the Japanese economy that puzzle foreigners are a consequence of a powerful commitment to domestic harmony, and overregulation of the Japanese economy is motivated in part by a desire to protect the weak and defenseless. For example, the large redundant staffs in Japanese retail stores developed from an effort to employ many individuals who would otherwise be unemployed and discontented. This situation is also a major reason for the low level of productivity in non-manufacturing sectors, and it accounts in part for Japan's resistance to foreign direct investment by more efficient foreign firms. The Japanese system of lifetime employment has also been utilized as a means to promote social peace. Like Japanese firms, unlike their American rivals, are very reluctant to downsize and lay off thousands of employees. At the opening of the 21st century, however, Japan's economic problems are causing this situation to change. Nevertheless, the commitments to political independence and social harmony are major factors in the Japanese state's determination to maintain firm control over the economy. Moreover, following Japan's defeat in World War II, the ruling tripartite alliance of government bureaucracies, the governing Liberal Democratic Party, and big businesses began to pursue vigorously the goal of catching up with the West. To this end, the state assumed a central role in the economy, and specifically, the elites pursued rapid industrialization through a strategy employing trade protection, export-led growth, and other policies. Moreover, the Japanese people have also supported this extensive interventionist role of the state, for they believe that the state has a legitimate and important economic function in promoting economic growth and international competitiveness. The government's bureaucracy and the private sector, with the former frequently taking the lead, have consistently worked together for the collective good of Japanese society. So now let's move on to the industrial policy of Japan. Industrial policy has been the most remarkable aspect of the Japanese system of political economy. In the early post-war decades, the Japanese provided government support for favored industries, especially for high-tech industries, through trade protection, generous subsidies, and other means. The government also supported creation of cartels to help declining industries and to eliminate excessive competition. In this regard, the Japanese state's extensive use of what is known as the infant industry protection system deserves special attention. So, among the policies Japan has used to promote its infant industries include the followings that will be shown in the PowerPoint presentation, because that's too long. Japanese industrial policy was most successful in the early post-war years when Japan was rebuilding its war-torn economy. However, as Japan closed the technology gap with the West and its firms, because Japanese industrial policy was most successful in the early post-war years when Japan was rebuilding its war-torn economy. However, as Japan closed the technology gap with the West and its firms became more powerful in their own right, Japan's industrial policy considerably less significant in the development of the economy. Yet the population and the government continued to believe that the state should play a central, or at least an important supportive role in continuing industrial evolution of the economy. So that's all. That's my report for the survey of the most influential national political economy systems in the world, and I am to be followed by Miss Louise Deirdre about the German system of social market capitalism.
Good day and peace be with you everyone. My name is Luis Deirdre B. Del Mundo from BSIS 1-1. I belong to the group 2, and now let's talk about the German system of social market capitalism. The German economy has some characteristics similar to the American and some to the Japanese system of political economy, but it is quite different from both in other ways. On the other hand, Germany, like Japan, emphasizes exports and national savings and investment more than consumption. However, Germany permits the market to function with considerable freedom. Indeed, most states in Western Europe are significantly less interventionist than Japan. Furthermore, except for the medium-sized business sector or Mittelstand, The non-governmental sector of the German economy is highly oligopolistic and is dominated by alliances between major corporations and large private banks. It was mentioned that Germany has some characteristics similar with America and Japan. Well, Germany benefits from a highly skilled labor force, and in US private individuals and business firms make of the most decision, while in Germany and Japan have similar in their history in war and on economic gradual political renewal, but at the same time they are very different in culture and historical experience. The German system of political economy attempts to balance social concerns and market efficiency. The German state and the private sector provide a highly developed system of social welfare. The German national system of political economy is representative of the corporatist or welfare state capitalism of continental Europe, in which capital, organized labor, and government cooperative in management of the economy. This corporatist version of capitalism is characterized by greater representation of labor and larger society in the governance of corporate affairs than in Anglo-Saxon shareholder capitalism. Although the continental economies differ from one another in many respects, in all of them, the state plays a strategic role in the economy. It is significant, especially in Germany, that major banks are vital to the provision of capital to industry, while in many European countries, employee councils have some responsibility for running the company. In German, labor has a particular important role in corporate governance. Indeed, the law of codetermination mandates equal representation of the employees and management on supervisory boards, although the power of labor of these boards can be easily overstated. The system of a significant factor in Germany's post-war history of relatively smooth labor relations. This could only mean that Germany, therefore, is part of a welfare state tradition that is focused on the social stability with a liberal state tradition that is focused on the avoidance of state intervention. The most important contribution of the German state to the economic success of their economy has been indirect. During the post-war era, the German federal government and the governments of the individual Länder or states have created a stable and favorable environment of private enterprise. Their laws and regulations have successfully encouraged a high savings rate, rapid capital accumulation, and economic growth. Germany has a highly developed system of codified law that reduces uncertainty and creates a stable business climate. The American common law tradition guides U.S. business, and the Japan bureaucracy relies on administrative guidance. And it was said that the success of their economy has been indirect. Well, I guess the post-war era has played a large contribution to the economy of Germany as it is today, and led them to be successful. At the core of the German system of political economy is their central bank, or also known as Bundesbank. The Bundesbank's crucial role in post-war German economy has been compared to that of the German General Staff in earlier German domination of the continent. Movement towards the European economy and monetary union has further increased the powerful impact of the Bundesbank. Although the Bundesbank lacks the formal independence of the American Federal Reserve, its actual independence and pervasive influence over the German economy have rested on the belief of the German public that the Bundesbank is the defender of the mark or euro and the staunch opponent of dreaded inflation. Indeed, the Bundesbank did create the stable macroeconomic environment and low interest rates that have provided vital support to the post-war competitive success of German industry. Deutsche Bank or the Bundesbank Supervisors keep track of the institution's solvency and liquidity advocacy and their risk situation at all the times. Other quantitative and qualitative aspects, such as business model, sustainability, and the internal organizational structure, also play an important role in prudential supervision. On the other hand, the role of the German state in the microeconomic aspects of the economy has been modest. The Germans, for example, have not had an activist industrial policy, although, like other advanced industrial countries, the government has spent heavily on research and development. The German government has not also intervened significantly in the economy to shape its structure, except in the support it has given through subsidies and protection to such dying industries as coal and shipbuilding and the state-owned business such as Lufthansa and the Bundesbank. This talks about the mail and telecommunications. However, since the early 1990s, these sectors have increasingly been privatized. On the whole, the German political economy system is thus closer to American market-oriented system than to the Japanese system of collective capitalism. So, let me share you the few details why the economy of Germany is strong as of today. Well, the first one is the important role of industry. In German, the share of industry gross value added is 22.9%, making it the highest among the G7 countries. The strongest sectors are vehicle construction, electrical industry, and engineering and chemical industry. The second one is the high export quota. It was mentioned earlier that Germany emphasizes exports and national savings and investment more than consumption. Together with China and the USA, Germany is one of the three largest exporting nations. In 2017, Germany exported goods worth of 1,278.9 billion euros. The export quota was almost 40% and over 50% in industry. The third one is open economy. Judging by the importance of foreign trade of gross domestic product or the GDP, Germany is the most open economy among the G7 countries. The foreign trade quota is currently 84.4%. That's the sum of imports and exports in relation to GDP. In comparison, the USA quota is 26.7%. The fourth one is high-performing medium-sized enterprise. Medium-sized enterprises from the heart of the German economy. In other words, companies with an annual turnover of less than 50 million euros and less than 500 employees. This sector of the economy embraces 99.6% of German companies. More than 1,000 of these companies are so-called hidden champions, often publicly less well-known international market leaders. The fifth one, best trade fair location. Germany is the world's premier location for organizing international trade fairs. 2/3 of the major global industrial events take place in Germany. 10 million visitors attend around 150 international fairs and exhibitions each year. The sixth one is strong economic centers. The most important economic centers in Germany are the metropolitan regions of Munich. This includes the high technology of Germany, Stuttgart, which talks about vehicle construction, Rhein-Neckar, which includes chemical and IT, Frankfurt am Main, this talks about finance, and Hamburg, this talks about port, aircraft, construction, and media, while Berlin or Brandenburg is the strongest startup region. The largest German employers are Volkswagen, which has 642,000 employees worldwide, Deutsche Post, which has 519,000, Robert Bosch, which has 402,000, Scars Group, Retail, 400,000, and Siemens, which has 372,000. And that would be all for the German political economy. I hope you learned something. Thank you.
And to summarize it all, international political economy is a phenomena wherein state border transcend. When we say transcend, it's about to outdo some attribute or power. The international political economy studied the relationship between governments, businesses, and social forces. It has three major theoretical perspectives which is necessary to the international political economy to function well. The the three major theoretical perspective is mercantilism, liberalism, and Marxism. This chapter talks about what should be the role of a state in the development according to the mercantilists and the liberals. The mercantilist is the one who emphasizes how important of economic wealth to the power of a state. And while the liberals, like David Ricardo, he said a state should engage in the international trade according to their comparative advantages. This chapter help us understand all the or all core issues rather in about international trade, international finance, lastly is international investment. Um, it also clarifies us the importance of the International Monetary Fund or IMF, World Bank and World Trade Organization or WTO. The International Monetary Fund is the one responsible in fixing exchange rates, and World Bank is the one who in charge in infrastructure development of a one state, while World Trade Organization is the one who manages the processes of intern who manage the processes of multilateral negotiations between states.
So, what is the importance of studying international political economy? So, taking everything into consideration, IPE or global political economy, it is a field of study that prepares you to understand the structures, the hierarchies, the power and dynamics that regulate finance and trade, drive globalization and economic nationalisms. And also, it will help you to understand the impacts of the distribution of wealth and poverty within a region, states, or also the nation. GPE or Global Political Economy, it is a field of study that deals with the interaction between political and economic forces. And some of you are having confusions that what is GPE and what is IPE. So these both terms are similar and interchangeably, as both of it indicates the wider scope in political economy that reaches relations and states. One integral part of studying international political economy because it is really significant for us as it helps us to provide the tools on our theoretical research and also it will help us on our applied policy analysis. And also for example, the political actions of nation states clearly affects the international trade and monetary flows. So, what is the importance of studying international political economy as a student? So, as a student and future global leaders, we international studies students helps us to be more knowledgeable about this. It is really viable for us to know what is IPE or GPE all about because it will help us to raise our awareness on what's happening on our current society. And also with this, we can amplify our voice and we are more aware on what's happening on our society. So with this, knowing that economics and politics are the two major factors that leads the nation into progression. So it is really important for us to study about this. So with this, we are hoping that you are more enlightened about what is IPE all about. And we hope that you listen very well and we would like to thank you for understanding and for your cooperation to listen. So again, this is our group 2 and this is what international political economy is all about.